Hi, welcome to Engage New York, Module 4, Lesson 16. Go ahead and read the objective with me while I read it. I can solve word problems using tape diagrams and fraction by fraction multiplication. Before we get started, though, we're going to go ahead and start with some fluency. And if you notice, here, this little bit of fluency here is actually going to review lessons 14 and 15. So let's take a look at this. Multiply fractions, but it also has the word model here. So you're going to have to draw a model as well. So on these 4 problems, we're going to draw a model. So let's go ahead. 1/3 times 2. So 1/3 of 2/5 is the same as 1/3 times 2/5, right? All right, so that's what we're doing. But before we get started on actually solving that, which is quite easy, right? You are going to draw a model. So I'm going to start this first one with you. So we're trying to find 1/3 of 2/5. So we're going to find, here is our 2/5 down here, right? So let's divide this up into fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and now 2/5 is shaded, right? Now, what we want to find out is what is 1/3 of the 2/5. So now, over here on this side, let's divide this up into thirds. Now remember the agreement we made when we said the first fraction is always going to go here along the side and the second fraction is going to go here. So I did exactly the same thing. I just did it in a different order than we normally do it. So now I am going to take 1/3, one section of 2/5. Now remember, there's only 2 pieces. I'm not going to color in. I'm not going to shade in this whole 1/3. I'm only going to shade in what 1/3 of what we already have, right? So when we divided this up into thirds, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We have 15 parts, right? How many parts are double shaded? It's just this part right here, right? So 2/15 is what is double shaded, correct? So now let's come over here and solve. And just do 1/3 of 2/5. 1/3 times 2/5 is the same as 2/15. So they both go together. So I want you to go ahead and I want you to try the rest of these 3 problems. Try your best to get some sort of little model in each area and then come back to check your work. The next section right here of the fluency is actually preparing you for lessons 17 and 18. So go ahead. This is review. You should be able to do that and come back and check your work. All right, so let's take a look at the results here. So simply multiplying across is 6/15. Then I drew my model. I broke it up into 2/3, shaded in 2/3. Then up here, our first fraction, I put down the side here, and I broke that up into fifths, and then shaded in 3/5 of what we had, right? So it ended up giving us 6/15. Here, 4/15 come down here, and I broke this up. I sectioned this off into 5 equal parts, and I shaded in 2 equal parts. Then I came over here and divided this into 3 equal parts and shaded in 2/3 of what we were working with and came up with 4/15. Then over here, 3/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, shaded in 3/4, came over here, I added our fraction 3/5, Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal parts. I shaded in 3/5 of what we had, right? I didn't go all the way across because we were only working with this section right here. So 3/5 of 3/4. All right, hopefully you were able to pull that off and do well. Next section. This section review is going to prepare you for the next two lessons, 17 and 18. It's going back to what you know about fractions and decimals. Okay, remember a fraction is a decimal is a fraction. So 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10, what does that equal? You're right, 3/10, right? So if I have 1/10 how many times? I have it once, twice, 3 times, right? So I have 3 times 1/10 is equal to 3/10. All right. So what does tenths look like in a decimal? Do you remember? Well, it's 0.1, right? So now when we're going to multiply this, we are going to multiply. And remember, when you multiply, your number's getting bigger. So your decimal is moving in this direction because your decimal is getting larger. All right. Now, in this situation, our decimal is not going to move. It's simply 3 times 0.1. So our answer is 0.3 because 0.3 is the same as 3/10. Okay, now let's move on to this next problem. 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10. How many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many tenths do we have? We have 5 tenths, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 times what? 1/10, which is equal to 5/10. Now, we were multiplying by 1/10. What does 1/10 look like as a decimal again? That's right, it's 0.1. So 5 times 0.1 is 0.5. All right. Now, it's going to get a little more complicated, but not too much. From here, where we have 7 times 0.1. Well, 0.1 is 1/10, right? So it's 0.7. Now we have 7 times 0.01. Well, what is 0.01? Well, that's 1/100th, right? So 1/100th is going to be 7 times. If you had 1/100th 7 times, you would have 7 hundredths, right? So 0.07 is 0 hundredths. Is 7 hundredths. All right, now 9 times 0.1, what is that going to be? So really, this is 9 times 1/10, right? 1/10. So this would become 9/10, right? And then what would this be? This would be over 100th, right? Again, and if you had 9 of those and added them up, because remember, multiplication is repeated addition, right? You would have 9 hundredths, 0.09. All right, if this is the preview for what's coming, I think this is going to work out just fine, don't you think? All right, so now let's come across and let's multiply 20 times 1/10. So 20 times 1 is 20, and this is really over 1, right? So this is 10. 20 over 10, you can slash the zeros and you end up with 2, right? All right, let's see if you can do this one on your own. Go ahead and try it and check back in just a second. Okay, so 80 times 1/10 is 80 over 10 is 8. So if you had 81 tenths, you added up 81 tenths, you'd end up with 8. Okay, so the next part, what we're doing. Now, notice that normally when you multiply by any number, your number always gets bigger. So your number is traveling along the place value chart and moving in a greater direction, right? So as your number moves in this direction, your decimal keeps moving in the opposite direction, right? Well, we're not multiplying here by a whole number. We're multiplying by a fraction of a number, a tenth. We're multiplying by 1/10. So when you multiply by 1/10, you could simply do this. You could multiply it out like this, but you don't need to. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to multiply and move your decimal one place over. So we're now not on the 10th and the 100th. You're not 10, 100, and 1,000. This decimal is not going anywhere. It's this decimal on the whole number that's going to travel. Now, on a whole number, you know that the decimal point sits right after the whole number, right at the end. Because as soon as you cross over, you're now in the tens, hundreds, or thousands place, right? Okay, so now when you multiply by a tenth, you're actually taking a piece of it. So you're trying to find out what piece, what is 1/10 of 20. So when you're trying to find out 1/10 of 120, because remember the multiplication sign also means of, right? We're simply going to move our decimal one place over. So 20 times 0.1 is simply 2. Now, let's try it with 20 times 0.01. Well, this is the hundredths. What is 1/100th of 20? Now, we're going to move our decimal twice because we have two numbers behind the decimal. Here, we had one number behind the decimal. We moved the decimal one time. Here, we have two numbers behind the decimal. We're going to move the decimal twice. Once, twice. That is going to be our new number. So 1/100th of 20 is 0.20. It's 2/10. 2/100. Sorry. All right. Now, let's come over here. Let's try that same strategy. And let's go over here. We have one number behind the decimal, right? So in a whole number, the decimal sits right on the edge right there, right? Okay, I want you to try out these two problems and come back and check your work. All right, let's check your work. So 80 times 0.1, I'm going to move my decimal one time. There's one number behind the decimal. Then I have 80 and I'm multiplying by 0.1, which is 1/100th of 80, which becomes, when you multiply it, I'm going to move my decimal twice because there's two numbers behind the decimal. Now I end up with 0.8. Now I want to come back over here really quick. When I said 200ths, it's not 200ths. We really don't need to have that zero right there. I just carried it over. So 1/100th of 20. So if you took 1/100th of 20, which would become 0.2, well, 0.2 is 2/10. So 2/10 is, which is equal to, again, 0.2. And if you have the zero there, the zero isn't going to matter. Okay? So it's 2/10, not 200. Sorry about that. Okay. And the same here. All right, now we're going to move on to 15 times 1/10. What is that going to be? So let's take a look. 15 times 1 is 15. And we know there's really a 1 under that fraction, right? So 1 times 10 is 10. Now, what would that become as a fraction? That would become 1 5/10, right? So 1 5/10 is going to turn into 1.5. 1 whole, and 5/10. All right, so what's the similarity here? Well, this is 15 times 1/10. This is 15 times 1/10, right? So knowing what we just talked about, here is our decimal, right? And we're multiplying. Our number's going to get smaller because we're multiplying by a decimal or a fraction. So we're taking a piece of it. So 1/10 of 15, we're going to move our decimal 1 time, right? So it becomes 1.5 as well. So I want you to see that relationship. Okay, so now we're going to multiply by 1/100th. So here's our decimal, right? It always sits right after the ones spot, the ones place. So we're going to move our decimal twice. Once, twice. All right, so here, now, our new number is 0.15. All right, now I want you to try this little grouping, 37 times 1/10, 37 times 1/10, and 37 times 0.01 or 1/100. Come back and check your work. All right, how did you do on that? So 37 over 10 becomes 3 7/10, right? Because 10 can go into 37 3 times, and there would be 7/10 left over, which becomes 3 7/10. So you can take your fraction and put it in a decimal. Then here, 37 times 0.1 or 1/10 becomes 3.7. And then 37 times 0.01, which is 1/100th. You're going to multiply. Remember to start with that decimal point in the correct spot, and you're going to end up with 0.37. Now remember, we're multiplying by fractions or decimals, pieces. So your number is actually going to get smaller. It's not like multiplying two whole numbers together. Two whole numbers, your number is going to get bigger, and your decimal goes in the opposite direction. But this, we're multiplying by small little pieces of a piece. All right, that's going to do it for our fluency for today. And now we're going to take on the concept development. Now, you're going to need, you can jump right into your problem set from here. And we can write directly in our problem set. We have 7 problems in our problem set. But we're going to do this, we're going to take these problems little by little. I'm going to start you off, and then I might have you work on a problem or two, and then come back and check your work after I kind of show you and get you going. All right? All right, meet me back here for concept development.